Resume. So Luis, come on back. Let's hop on here. We're on a Friday workshop that's going to wind up on the internet. So we'll reintroduce things. This Friday workshop, June 2nd. And we're going to talk through backup maturity. Obviously, you can see the Backup Radar brand down there. Lifecycle Insights has become part of the ScalePad family. You guys have cool toys to talk about. But really what we wanted to talk through today was blending together some lifecycle and some backups. And we've built out some backup best practices for MSPs. We're going to give those to you guys and let you import those into your Lifecycle Insights. And you can even run this as your own internal assessment to determine where you are on backup maturity for your organization. So Luis, you were kind of the brainchild behind this. You want to jump in and take it away?
For sure. Well, credit where credit is due. This came out of Marnie's QBR maturity assessment, which has a similar format to this. The idea was kind of, based loosely on this operational maturity stuff that a lot of people have heard Paul Dipple talk about at length, the 5 levels of operational maturity levels and so on. We wanted to simplify a little bit of the approach. And of course, this leans heavily into some of the challenges that Backup Radar solves as a product. But notwithstanding, I think there's a lot of good best practices here to try and think about as you're working on some of the core business standards in your MSP, some of your business practices, and or how you're going to market with customers, or what you talk about to customers and QBRs about their backups, how much you have conversations with them about the risk. So the idea is look at red, yellow, green, try to see where you feel you are on the maturity assessment. Now, again, Alex was saying you'll be able to import this into LCI, so you'll be able to run this as an assessment internally. We were even talking about producing a client-friendly version of it, where you could go through and do a backup maturity assessment on a per client basis as well. If you guys would be interested in that.
Let's throw it out there. Like, who would be interested in having as a lead magnet or as a lead gen component, something where you could go out and run a 15 or 20 question assessment against the customer's backups to show them how mature their backup and recovery is and what kind of a position they're in as far as backup goes. If we put that in the platform, does that have value to you guys?
I do see a couple
about where the leads come from.
Yeah, I see some head nods.
All right. Yeah, I got one yes in chat. Okay.
I just think overall it's a fantastic.
Make it a WordPress plugin. Yeah, I wish we were. I am not that guy. I could build you a spreadsheet. Okay, cool. Well, based on that feedback, I think we'll commit to getting that set for you. So we'll put a little more time into making the customer facing version of this.
Yeah, it's such a great conversation topic, to be honest. When I had, now I can say it's in the past, truly, today's Friday, 2 days ago, literally, was the completion of my exit out of my MSP that I sold last year, and that finally I completed the 1-year integration thing. And so I am going through a full-blown identity crisis all of yesterday and today. If anybody has any advice for me, please help me. And let me work on your problems, please. And so the conversations we had with customers at the MSP with regards to backups, we're always trying to get them to understand, hey, here's what risk exists in the environment. Here are where we believe some of the best practices or even baseline of your backup maturity should be. And I was never a pushy sales guy, to be perfectly honest. And so I always led with just, hey, I just want you to understand the risk so that we can have an agreement on that you understand it and that you're okay accepting that risk, and we can move on from there. And more often than not, that always turned into a conversation around, well, how do we get rid of some of this red? How do we move some of this stuff into the green? And I think that's the kind of conversation I loved having with customers, because now we can get into solving for the technology, of course, and all that stuff. So yes, Tim, backups are required for cyber insurance. I think a lot of customers are very informed on what some of the requirements are with regards to some of the recent cyber insurance updates and stuff like that. And even up to the last few weeks ago, I was seeing customers just literally, without reading them, fire over security questionnaires that some of their own customers were bringing to them to work with them. And it's like, did you guys actually read this? And it's like, no, we just, we figured you guys manage the IT, you can fill it out. And little do they know, it's like this whole FTC safeguard stuff. You need to have policies you need to have, all these things which are run internally, but obviously guided by the MSP. And so I believe truly that there's a ton of value in having this kind of conversation about maturity across all the technology stack with customers that is conducive to outcomes. So of course, Backup Radar is a platform that helps solve a lot of these challenges. And so I won't get into a pitch of any kind here, but it's a powerful platform. Check it out if you want to have a look.
Yeah, so I think I would love to hear from you guys what else we can bankers and VCs are looking to cyber resilience before. Oh wow, I hadn't heard that one yet. Kirk, are you actually seeing that through some customers, or where are you seeing that?
I'm talking to bankers. I actually did a webinar 2 years ago on that, and that commercial bankers and VCs, they're starting to, I mean, you're not going to want to give funds to a company that's going to get ransomware next week because they've got open RDP ports. So there is a more trend of, hey, before we do this, can you kind of do your due diligence to make sure we're not putting money into a sunk cost?
Are they dragging you in to go out and meet with a prospect or go talk to a client who might be, or a prospect, somebody who they're going to invest in?
It's great to have networking opportunities with those types of people.
Yeah.
A lot of like your different networking groups, you're going to have like your law firms, you're going to have banks, you're going to have investors, you're going to have wealth managers. Wealth managers are another great one because they usually talk to high wealth people, and usually the high wealth people own companies.
Mhm.
And so it's good to have those conversations that can lead to that. So more of a center of influence.
Nice.
Type.
I like it. I like it a lot. I'll throw in chat. Wes Spencer gave us some gold when he and I presented an event out in Chicago, and he dropped this slide in his PowerPoint presentation. So it's the must be this tall to ride this ride. And this is from Wes's time at Fifth Wall Insurance. And what they were seeing was more and more of the providers as they come back. These are the 5 things that they will absolutely not grant an insurance policy without. And if you don't know, when you get a questionnaire from the insurance company, not all of the questions that are on the questionnaire are questions that they'll decline your coverage over. Some of them may be questions that they're just doing data collection to fill out their actuary tables for the future. So I collect a bunch of information. Keith tells me he doesn't have XYZ checkbox checked in Microsoft 365. I just go noted and move on, and I insure Keith. If Keith gets breached, then I go, hey, people who get breached don't have this checkbox checked, right? And they start to do the math. And insurance companies they live and die by actuary tables, right? And so they start to build their actuary tables based on all of this. And in a future date, some of those checkboxes will be mandatory. But what Fifth Wall did was kind of peel the curtain back on that and said the 5 questions that we're seeing as mandatory on almost every application are the 5 that are in the chat, which are multi-factor authentication on remote access, segregated backups, so air-gapped backups of some kind. Do we even have that in our
in the maturity assessment? Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement. This was, like I said, it leans heavily specifically into the Backup Radar functionality, and it's more around the monitoring and stuff like that. But I think nobody argues that air-gapped backups is a standard best practice these days. Is it getting done like that all the time? I don't know, but
probably not. It's definitely something that we should add to the customer-facing version of this as we go to build it out. But then air-gap backups, of course, EDR 24/7 managed is the point that Wes likes to make on this, is that if your MSP is monitoring it 8x5, it doesn't count anymore. Patching and vulnerability management, and then cybersecurity and employee training. So those 5 things are kind of the deal breakers right now for cyber insurance companies. That's pretty interesting to me that backups is so high on the list, and that they're getting specific about what constitutes a backup, right? And I copied my data file into my Dropbox, doesn't cut it anymore.
I don't know that a lot of customers still consider backup as their number one, way to fight a ransomware attack. They still think of, network security and AV and EDR, all those things. But so it's an interesting conversation to have for sure. By the way, there's this a little bit long in the tooth because I've been using it for years, but way back when I was talking about onboarding and baselining and just doing sort of an overarching best practice sort of review for customer, almost like your initial QBR to some extent, I put together this list of like 234 items that even until recently we were using as our deployment project or remediation project with customers that came on board. And so if interested, I'd be happy to stick that in the chat if anybody would like to see that. Those are some of the things you could potentially add to your LCI assessment framework if you wanted to use it as sort of a first QBR review or a onboarding review to some extent. Be happy to throw that up there.
Yeah. And to Tim's point, I think RTO and RPO are easier described or explained in a graphic to your customer. And I used to have one kind of like this that I shared with my clients when we started talking about backups. And we would literally just go show them a little something like this that explains the difference between RPO and RTO because both of them matter. And one of the you mentioned, Luis, just in passing, that nobody thinks about the fact that backups are the fastest way back from a ransomware attack. I heard a stat the other day that it costs twice as much in time to pay the ransom and get back up with ransomware keys as it does to restore from backups.
Yeah,
that is assuming that restore from backups is long and painful. For a lot of us, it's really just not if you have the right backups in place. So backups are absolutely your first line of defense, and they also save your customer a ton of time and a ton of money when downtime is what counts.
I pasted a little image also from my own QBR template back when we used to do them with Excel. But this was something that was great because when I did the review with a customer and I showed them this particular sheet in the spreadsheet, I would be like, hey, so let's talk about these are your applications or areas of business, lines of business, apps and whatnot. And so here's what I would explain. What is RTO? What is RPO? And one of the easy conversations that I could always have with customers is, well, tell me how long would it be okay for you to not have access to your point of sale application or what have you before it really starts to affect you, your brand, your people? What is your hourly burn when people can't access an application? And it's interesting because if you had just asked the question, hey, how long does you think it takes to restore from a total server calamity? Most customers are completely out of touch with reality. They'll say things like, oh, an hour, is that good enough? A server flood, server room flood, that kind of thing. They're just completely out of touch. And so when you start to have that conversation openly and explain, and then they realize that there is real pain associated with the longer RTO and RPO, suddenly it's like, hey, maybe we are okay with increasing the storage of the backup system so that we can have more snapshots and retain more hourly backups. Because, honestly, I don't think we can afford to lose 8 hours of data if we're only doing a daily backup. That kind of thing is just an easy conversation once the customer understands the impact of the RTO and RPO. So 100% recommend doing that.
Yep. And Tim, to your point, backup radar, talking to lifecycle insights is definitely stuff that we've talked about on the back end. We're way, way, way early to be promising features and things like that, but know that those are exactly the conversations that the ScalePad executive team is having about, they didn't buy all these products for them to sit in their unique individual corners and collect dust. The goal is for them all to talk and for us to be able to share this data. We want to take the data out of the server room conversation and move it into the boardroom conversation, if you will. And that's really a matter of getting that data consolidated down to something concise and putting it in lifecycle insights.
On this RTO, RPO topic, I think it's pretty relevant that a lot of us as MSPs started with a few customers. We kind of set things up as we went. And then as we brought on more customers, we never went back to standardize sort of our approach to retention policies, our approach to that conversation at all. And so one of the things we found, River Run, who's a Wisconsin-based MSP, they kind of brought this to light in one of the conversations we had with them. So, one of the things that Backup Radar kind of forced us to do is it forced us to think about the retention policies across across all our customers because there was just no way that we could manage backups at scale unless we understood what we were doing across the board. And so it kind of gives you the impetus to go back and look at, okay, well, we need to standardize the way we approach RTO, RPO, and just retention policies in general. And I think that creates a lot of standardization, removes a ton of the ambiguity. It just makes it easier to hire, a new team member that comes on and says, well, how are these backups managed for this customer? And a lot of that stuff would normally just live in the echo chamber of the tribal knowledge, of course. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. And I like to tell the story at my MSP. I say this all the time. Like we talk a lot about budgets at Lifecycle, right? And the second fastest way to get fired at an MSP is to surprise your customer with unplanned expenses.
yeah.
The first is losing data. And I always tell the story about the customer who fired me. I got fired by a customer who, and you were talking about this, Luis, like in 2006 or 2008, CrashPlan was the best thing in the world. Like it was offsite backups. It gave us what we needed. We rolled it out all over the place, but it didn't do images. And image-based backups were hard back then. There weren't a lot of choices. They were super expensive. So we rolled CrashPlan all over the place. When we became a Datto partner, we went and replaced all of our CrashPlan backups with Datto backups. I had one vet who would not let me replace his backups. He says, I don't want to pay the difference. I'm not willing to do it. And we made him sign something that said he understood that downtime would be several days in the event of an issue. We made him sign something that, basically absolved us of all liability. And when he finally had a system failure, it took us 2.5 days to get him up and running because we had to restore we had to rebuild a domain controller. We had to restore a Citrix server. We had to reconfigure everything and stand it all back up. And we had him back up and running in 2.5 days. We were pretty impressed with that. And we went to meet with him and kind of tear this all apart after the fact. And he says, you're fired, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say you got fired anyways, right?
And
I saw that coming.
And I gave him the page he had signed. I said, do you remember when we had this conversation? He says, yeah, I do. You told me so.
You're still fired.
You're still fired. He said, I was down for 2.5 days. Somebody has to pay for that. And I just want to point that out because the guy, he's actually a decent dude. After he fired me, I called him when one of my dogs needed something and had him do surgery on my dog. He's a good dude. But in that situation, he was pissed. And somebody was going to pay the penalty for that. I think that could apply to any and every one of us. So I think it's a little bit of a challenge and something that we just all need to be aware of. It's certainly something that's a great point, Greg. Thank you. It's certainly something that we should all consider, right? There's a few easy ways for MSPs to get fired. Not revisiting backups is a really, really good, really, really easy one to let slide. To the point of the scorecard template that Luis pasted up there, I mean, what he's doing there is really a little bit of a business impact analysis, right? Is this thing critical? Is it high risk? Is it moderate risk? We've talked about adding some business impact analysis components to Lifecycle Insights questions. So when you mark something red, you have to go in and say, what would the impact to the business be in dollars or time or whatever? It's a feature request that's out there that hasn't gotten enough upvotes, so it hasn't gotten delivered. But there's a real beauty in being able to take something like this and pick it apart and talk to the customer about the business impact of a failure. So that's definitely something that we should consider. Greg, great point about the fifth wall assessment. I will go back and look at that because quite frankly, I forgot that they had delved that deep into backups there. So
I'll stick my manual scorecard template in the chat just for shits and giggles because I think it might give you ideas for things you want to throw into your assessment framework in LCI. Still valuable.
Yeah, and even if you're using this for additional ideas, we're going to harp on the fact that I borrowed from the fifth wall. So the fifth wall one's pretty good, Greg. They did a really good job, and what they did was just consolidate like 25 or 30 insurance company assessments. So it's the stuff that people are asking when you get backed into a corner. But as you're doing all of these, consider adding some framework alignment to them as well, just so that you can be checking the boxes on CIS or NIST or one of the bigger frameworks, so that God forbid you ever wind up in a courtroom. A couple of bald guys on the internet told me to do it this way is not a defensible position. I'm following the best practices of some industry experts is definitely the position that you guys want to be in. So I think that's the the conversation we wanted to have today. I've already imported this into Lifecycle, so I'm gonna flip over to Lifecycle real quick and just show you guys what this looks like if you import it. It's pretty straightforward and simple. I got an error importing it the first time. I think I fixed the error, so you shouldn't get an error when you import it. But if you do, just click OK, and all of the items will still import. You'll get a template that looks like this. And the error that I got was just related to some of these quotation marks down here at the bottom, and they came in as little ASCII characters that I had to go back and rekey. But other than that, everything imports just fine. It'll drop right in there, and then when you go run an assessment through this, you'll literally be able to sit down with your client. Kirk, you're not funny when you send the snarky comments only to me. It's not as good. It's not. You're supposed to harass the whole crew. He was talking about you, Jeff, right in front of you, and he didn't even have the nerve to paste it in public. He pasted it in private chat. He said, "Lifecycle chat will respond within the next moon phase if you have some problems." I feel like he meant before this call is over, because I'm so happy with our support that I get to start a call with a customer and go, "Oh, you need a ticket for that? Don't worry, they'll respond before we hang up." And quite often they do. But
Yep.
So this is what the output from that looks like. We've got those broken just into 2 categories. You could always come up with some additional categories if you wanted to come up with a business impact category or something like that and add some more questions around that. Definitely some room to expand on this, but our goal was to give you something to get you started, give you a little bit of a jumping off point to be able to start having this conversation. And of course, like everything else, if you guys haven't seen this yet, I hope everybody on this call knows this, but if you don't, if you run this twice for a customer, maybe the way they are today versus the way they would be if they deployed your new data appliance, or the way they are today or versus the way they were 6 months ago, you can actually copy the old assessment, carry over all of your comments and all of your answers, and then just go fix the things that have, or change the things that have been fixed. So you can come down here and say, hey, these things are in a better place than they were the last time. And now when I go look at a comparison assessment, well, my summary will be better. And my comparison will show me where I came from versus where I am today. So especially if you're using this for a new sale, if you tweak this into a customer facing version of something, you can carry out and put in front of a customer. It'd be real easy to be able to say, Mr. Customer, you're covering about 67% of what we think good backups look like today. Your maturity is about 2/3 of what good looks like. If you were to roll over to our entry level solution, we'd get you to 85 or 90 or 95% like that. And then we'd spend a little bit more time writing policies, practicing procedures, teaching you how to respond to cover that last 5, 10, 15%, whatever's left. Make sense to everybody? Awesome. Well, that's a short one for today, folks. But like I said, and it wasn't on the recording, so I'm going to say it again for the recording. I think we're going to wrap here, and we'll do an open Q&A if anybody's got questions or wants to go over anything. But next week, make sure that you make this call next week. One of my favorite people, Robert Chaffee, is going to join this call. I will not say nice things like that in front of him, but Robert's going to join. He's going to talk through what his July 4th weekend 2020 felt like being part of the Kaseya event that happened. So he was one of the MSPs that was breached as part of the Kaseya event. He's going to talk us through what he did, what he would do differently, and what he is doing differently in his MSP today to make sure that he's on better footing in the case of an event like that in the future. So I think it's going to be one of the best Friday workshops we've ever had. So I would strongly encourage you guys to show up for that one. With that, we'll open it up to Q&A. We can talk about anything that's on you guys' mind. And other than that, we'll turn you guys loose to go have a Friday beer. Live stream that one. Yeah, I don't think we're going to live stream it. I want this to, and we do put them out on LinkedIn, but or on YouTube. I may even make that one a private link on YouTube just so that everybody can talk about it and ask questions that they might not want to ask in a public room, because I really want you guys to get the most out of that one. I do have some amazing gin here. Tim overdid it for my birthday and got me some very, very good gin. Kirk, it doesn't even have glass shards in it.
I was just going to ask that.
Yeah. I tried to FedEx Kirk some gin because he is a gin drinker as well, and it didn't work well. He got a box of glass shards that smelled like citrus and
It was the crunchiest gin I've ever had in my life.
Kirk, Kirk, go ahead and shoot me your address and I will send you a bottle of the gin
Do a better job than
From-
I did.
from the
We're gonna have
distillery
to
that I
send him a
used to
pair
work
of
at.
we're gonna have to send him
Okay.
a pair of bottles to see which one's better, because that is really up there. The stuff that you gave me is amazing. So
Well, thanks for that. I'd like to say I had a hand in playing in building that. I used to work for that distillery. So yeah, it's really good.
one of the
Fortunately, I
best gins
can't.
I've ever had. So
Awesome.
alrighty.
Anybody
Questions,
willing
comments,
to
emotional
share
outbursts?
a backup scary
Oh.
story?
I'm sure we all have one.
Yeah, well, not always
So-
everybody's willing to admit, but
I just had a client email a ticket in a day and a half ago with, please remove all the access, blah, blah, blah. You know, when those tickets come in, and generally our workflow is if something like that comes in, me, the CEO, whatever, gets involved. So I called the business owner and was like, hey, what's up? And after, a 20-minute conversation, one of the humans in their organization deleted 18,000 files from HR, finance, accounting, and legal, plus logged into those email addresses and deleted anything related to HR, accounting, finance, and legal across their entire organization. It was awful. Now, thank God for backups, because we had the proper safeguards in place to restore, and we had the proper auditing tools in place to figure out who the human was and stop it as quickly as we could. So
Was that a breach, or was that a human being malicious, or just stupidity?
that was a human being malicious. Insider threat, criminal investigation now happening. It's getting gross.
Well, that's what backups are for.
Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, even more so, they are a regulated industry, so it's going to get even uglier.
Oof.
But yay, backup came through. We were able to restore stuff. And fortunately, their RTO and their RPO, like, we had 21 days worth of data. And fortunately, we were able to recover to a point in time to get, they didn't lose any data.
Those are never fun. I had a backup
Gross.
vendor that rolled out such bad code for months. I mean, I had a full-time person dedicated to backups for a while, because our backup vendor was just rolling out bad code after bad code after bad code. They knew us by name when we called into the support team. So we sent them the meme that I just put in chat. You guys can all save that one. It's fun to use with vendors occasionally. Just don't send it to ours, because we really are testing it in production. Anybody else? Nobody's willing to share their scary stories. Ben's talking about Datto Backup lost him a client a few years back.
Well, talking about government agencies and things, I actually posted this on our internal Slack earlier today, or Discord or somewhere, but it was 2011. So before even cloud backups, had a CPA firm that got raided by some FBI DAs because they had a client that was doing some white collar crime. So they took all the workstations, the server, the backup. All they had left was an offsite backup that was probably about a week old. So we had to fight with the DA's office to get a copy of the server hard drive, which they then encrypted and then had to unencrypt it. So that took an additional week. Meanwhile, we're trying to rebuild their environment on a couple workstations with a backup. So, I always like to say weird crap happens. I've seen server rooms where it's in an office building and the office above them burned popcorn to the point that the sprinkler system went off, took out the server, and took out the on-site backup as well. So, it's so interesting that people are like, well, I've got it here. That's great if you have it here. What the hell happens if here's no longer here?
We had a school that had an air conditioner in the server room, and the drip for the air conditioner was right over top of the server. And we got them as a customer the day that the drip pan overflowed, and they had to call us on short notice because their teacher that did that kind of work didn't know what to do with it.
Oh, yeah.
So. Lost your wife's scrapbooking files. I formatted the wrong, actually F-disked and overwrote the wrong hard drive for my sister once.
And he survived to tell the story.
It was long, well, she was littler than me. She was older than me, but littler than me, or I wouldn't have. But I still haven't lived it down, and it's only been 30 years. So
Yeah, I still haven't lived this one down. And I did it 3 days before Christmas that year.
oh, yeah,
It was
we've all been there. We've all been
not
there.
fun. Not
Hopefully
fun at all.
hopefully these stories are helpful to someone to not make the same mistakes. That's all, right? And this is about examine your process, stick to your process. Make one more copy of everything that you think you need, and then make a copy of that and store it offline somewhere.
I think overarchingly, just customers just grossly underestimate risk, generally speaking. And it's never real until it happens directly to them or to somebody they know. And it's funny because I had a fairly large medical services based client that for years I'd been like begging them to do certain things, and it wasn't until the main doctor's buddy told them that they had been ransomware that he finally reaches out to me, says, "Hey, we should do this." So you just want to like pull the hair you don't have out because I don't know what was missing in that conversation. And so I think the tone of the QBR around risk is really important. I hate the sort of the FUD aspect of it. I just want the customer to understand what risk they have. The RTO RPO stuff was important.
Well, and we need to get them to understand the risk, but in that boot camp we did, and I keep going back to this, when I was standing there listening to how Wes Spencer talks about it, he's so good at it because he basically says, take that system over there in the corner, like if it was gone tomorrow, what would the impact be on your business? And that's not fun. That's not scary. It's not, oh, cyber criminals.
No, it's an actual risk conversation.
Yeah, it's not the Chinese are coming for you. It's, hey, if that thing disappeared tomorrow, whether it be hurricane, lightning strike, Chinese hacker, or anything else, how would your business operate? Let's talk about the exposure that you have and what we can do today to prepare you for it. Is there a paper process to back it up? Do we need to have $100,000 in redundancy over there? What do we need to do different with that particular system to make sure that it's always available and that backups are really the last possible case, the last thing that we use for any of this? Super important. And
I love Ross's story because I come from the Mac world where cloning drives was a lot more familiar and practical and common than it is nowadays. Windows folks do it a bunch as well, but back in the day, cloning was the way you did backups on Macs as well. And I remember I actually using this software tool called Carbon Copy Cloner. I selected the inverse of the source and destination, and the way Carbon Copy Cloner works is it runs rsync in the background, and so rsync is very quick to delete something on the destination if it's not there. And so I had because the drives were named the same by default, I picked the wrong one for source, the wrong for destination, and the second I pressed click, I could feel the pin in my stomach dropping to the ground, and I was like, shit. And I tried to stop it. It was too late. rsync had already basically wiped the root level of the directory. And so to Ross's story, ever since I never plug in a destination drive until I've selected the source, because that way I'm 100% guaranteed to know what side I'm going to and which side. But
when I lost my sister's data, it was the same thing. It was a Windows PC. It had two drives on it, a data drive and an OS drive. And I formatted the wrong one and installed Windows back to it before I realized what I had done. And after that, I always unplugged spare drives, like just pull them out. But to Brian's point, actually, it was Ben's point. Don't rely on the vendor, trust but verify. Ryan Weeks said something super interesting at the first Right of Boom. And for those of you who don't know Ryan Weeks, he was the CISO at Datto. And he said, how many people in this room, and there were 300 people in the room at the time, how many people in this room have called your backup vendor and said, I would like to do a DR test restore on all of my clients? Let's schedule that. 0 hands went up in a room of 300 people. And he says, I want you to think about what goes into that. There are bandwidth constraints. There are disk and IOPS constraints. There's a lot of things that happen when you start to do a restore. And some of the vendors don't even have the bandwidth to do that kind of a restore. They have these asymmetrical connections, they have disk latency issues, they have firewall issues, where they just can't push all this out at that point. And he says, you know, you might have to download a terabyte at a time. And if you, how many terabytes do you manage? How many terabytes do you back up? 150? 200-300? I don't know. The number's probably pretty big. And if you went to run all of that at once, which you would have to do in the event like what Robert's going to talk to us about tomorrow, you would have to spin, or next week, you'd have to spin all those backups up at the same time. Does your staff know what to do? Do your customers know what to do? Do they know what part of that belongs to them? If you had to spin it all up in the cloud because all of the, you know, on-site disks had to be preserved for forensics, would you understand how to spin it all up in the cloud and get your customer running? Would they know how to run out to the store and buy a machine from Staples and get it hooked up to the cloud instance? Do they even know where to start? And how many technicians do you have to help each of your customers if that happened to everyone all at the same time? And that was the impetus it took for me to go, holy crap, we really do have to take a second look at backups. We need to go back. This is about more than just shoveling data around. What does a recovery look like for multiples of my customers? And
That's all well and good, Alex, but hold on a sec. I have to go fix this printer issue and I'll be right back.
yeah, that's more important, I'm sure. I want to show one more thing actually, because after that we had a big conversation with all of our lifecycle partners at the time, and we talked about when you're building out your assets, what are the ones that are most important to restore? And we actually came in and showed a sample of creating an extra column in Lifecycle Insights to map restore priority. Because if you get breached, what are they going after? They're going after your command and control tools. So if you go into ConnectWise and say, hey, I'm going to document in here the restore priority of everything. I'm going to mark all the domain controllers priority number 1. I'm going to mark all the file and application servers priority number 2. I'm going to mark all the end workstations priority number 5. And then when my engineers have to get turned loose, now they know what to do in what order. Well, guess what? If you get breached, you're probably losing your ConnectWise. Now you can sync that data from a custom data field in ConnectWise into Lifecycle Insights, and you could actually use this not just to go sit with your customer and say, I need you to understand why things are done in this order, what a full restore looks like, but you can also have a second place for your team to go to look to figure out what restore priority actually looks like, because we all know if you have to rebuild an environment, not everything carries the same weight. And we had this conversation. We built this field actually after Right a Boom 2022. Yeah, 2022. And it was a great event, a great conversation. Ryan Weeks does a great job talking about that kind of stuff. It's really a shame he kind of fell off the face of the earth because he was an amazing voice in this channel that needed to be heard. But that was one of the things I took away from that on backups that I just thought was amazing. So hopefully that helps somebody. This can wait till Monday, but it can't wait till 2024. Just saying. You guys could still have a weekend.
I wonder if July 4th will be known as breach weekend. No, you know.
It was last year. We talked about it a little bit.
Well, that's my point. I think, you know, people are going to become more and more uneasy with that date approaching.
Yep. Yeah, I would be uneasy. And it's not just July 4th, right? It's every breach weekend or every holiday weekend. The number of breaches that and vulnerabilities that happen on the weekend are through the roof. I have a set of slides somewhere that I presented. I did it in where's the NASCAR Hall of Fame at? I don't even know. We did a 7-figure event wherever that is.
Charlotte.
Charlotte. There we go. We did a 7-figure.
Yeah, I couldn't get off mute fast enough. Charlotte, North Carolina.
And
Sorry,
so
guys.
I did a presentation dressed up as Ricky Bobby from Charlotte. But one of my slides was literally, you know, what are the two things that happen on Sunday, or what do breaches and racing have in common? Well, they both happen on Sunday while you're sitting on the couch, right? And that's the reality of it, is they look for the time when you're not there to react fast enough. And that's why 24/7 SOC is one of the things that was on that must be this tall to ride this ride slide from Fifth Wall, because they understand 24/7 managed and monitored means something when you take a weekend. You know, there some of the MDR and XDR vendors are bragging now that, you know, from the time they detect anomalous activity, they can shut it down in less than 60 seconds. You can't do that when you're watching the race, you know, sitting at home watching the race or doing whatever you do on 4th of July. So I look forward to everyone having an amazing 4th of July, and I hope that that we can do some things to make sure that everybody's prepared for it. So if anybody has questions about this, wants to circle back and talk about it, you can always reach out to me. You can always reach out to Luis. Mark and Casey are both on the call here somewhere. Jeff's on the call. Like, our whole team is here. If you guys ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. We want to be here to support you, not just scare you. That's obviously not our goal. But I hope this was a valuable session. With that, I think it's time to turn everybody loose for a break and a beer, and we'll call it a Friday. We'll see y'all back next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Lewis.
Bye-bye.